Hello everyone. I am Alex Lim, your host, and welcome to Author Story, the home of authors and stories that matter. This episode's featured guest is Faith McDonald, author of On the Loving End of Crazy: Finding Hope and Help to Face Your Loved One's Crippling Anxiety and Depression. So, Faith, welcome to Author Story. Thank you very much for being with us.
Alex, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this opportunity.
Wow, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so Faith, first off, your background. You are presently an assistant teaching professor at Penn State University, and you also hold a master's degree in education. So I know that writing is part and parcel of what you do. Well, about writing, first off, when did you first realize that the kind of power that writing brings, writing holds?
Oh, that's an excellent question, Alex. I'm a avid reader, so
Okay.
for me, lots of power in connecting with ideas and emotions when I read other people's work. As a writer, I think that I feel connected. I feel the power of words most when people say to me, "Oh, you really put my feelings into words.
Mm,
The things that you said, give me hope or help me know I'm not alone." Or
right.
I also love it if people say, "Oh, I got a laugh or a smile when I read your work."
Mm,
So I think for me, it's the words when they connect with people at the level of their feelings.
mm. All right, cool. All right, so again, writing. I know that writing for an academic paper is different from blogging or even writing for a book. So, what made you start writing columns for newspapers?
Okay. Well, I always, ever since I can remember, as a little girl, wanted to
Hmm.
be a writer.
Hmm.
And as I began to pursue that, sometimes there were things that happened that made me feel discouraged and think, oh, I can't do this, I'm not
Right.
good enough. And then other times I thought, wow, every opportunity I have, I'm just going to write. And
Right.
so actually, back in I think it was the early 1980s,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that I found a newspaper and they said, yeah, that they had a room for a column. And I began to write a
Mm.
column for that newspaper. And
Ah.
just again, it was back when, local newspapers were printed on paper
Okay.
and
Okay.
distributed locally. So that was really fun because I'd write a column and then I'd be out getting my groceries or out about in the town where we lived and people would say, "Oh, I saw your article, I
Mm.
saw your column."
Okay.
um,
All
so that's fun.
all right. Okay. And of course, you've gone on from there. I mean, I know you've got blogs and all that stuff going on right now.
Right, yeah. I was a writer during the switch from mainly print media to online, and but still there's things public. My book is a physical book,
Right.
not just an online book or an
Right.
ebook. And
Right. Okay. All right. Cool. Okay. Got that. All right. So I just like to acknowledge our cat is meowing. So if you hear in the background, that's her.
oh,
Okay. All right. So now on to the topic of the book. I mean, depression in general. We'll get to the book later. I acknowledge you're not an
okay.
expert. Okay. But what for you is the definition of depression?
Um, for me, the depression that I write about
Mm-hmm.
is a feeling of sadness, a feeling of inability to function in your daily life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that depression has come, people say, "Oh, I'm so depressed." And what they mean is, for 3 minutes, I feel sad.
Right.
We all struggle with that. The depression that my son, who, I tell his story in the book,
Mm-hmm.
the depression that he deals with is a depression that interferes with his life so powerfully, so severely that
Mm-hmm.
there are days when he can't get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's a it almost should be two different words.
Right.
There's this lighthearted depression almost, and then there's a depression that's definitely a physical disease
Mm-hmm.
that people struggle with and that really interferes with their ability to function.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, it's interesting you mentioned this as a disease. I mean, because this is a condition that a lot of people suffer from. I'm just curious, would you have any idea of, just how many people suffer from depression? This deep, kind of really deep depression?
I know there are figures, used to be, I think it was back in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
the university where I work, they did a study and they found that as many as 30% of college students face depression so
Wow.
severe that it interferes with their life at some point during a semester.
Wow.
That was, before the pandemic. I
Uh-huh.
think that, um, people are really facing depression in many more people, and people who struggle with depression during what shall we call it regular times,
Right, right.
are struggling even more. So it's really a hard thing.
Right, and I mean this is widespread. I mean, as you mentioned before, from what you read, about 30% of college-age adults. I mean, I'm sure the numbers even more during this time of pandemic. And I mean, everyone from top to bottom, I mean, old to young. I mean, they suffer from depression as well. So this is I mean, there's no better way to say it, I guess, than to call it a disease.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So all right. So on to the book. For for the benefit of our listeners who don't know what the book is about, can you give us a thumbnail sketch of what this is about?
Yes. My oldest son, when he went to college, was overcome by depression and anxiety
Mm-hmm.
so severe that it interfered with his ability to succeed at college.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in 2006,
Mm-hmm.
back before, at least for me, I didn't know depression was a disease. I didn't know it could be so overpowering that it interfered with your life. And
Right.
definitely there's a stigma now, but back then, even though that was only a decade ago,
Mm-hmm.
definitely more of a stigma. And probably I felt even more because I was a teacher at the school where he was attending and he was
Mm-hmm.
not succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
And it took us a long time to figure out, why he couldn't get out of bed, why he couldn't get to
Right.
classes, and
Right.
then to get him the help he needed
Right.
was again a long-term thing. He eventually became suicidal and was in
Wow.
our local hospital for 45 days, where he got significant help.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
the book is the story of our family going through that,
Mm-hmm.
learning that depression is a disease,
Right.
learning that, his is compounded by anxiety
Uh-huh.
disorder. And just how did we cope with that? How did I, learn to seek the help I needed
Mm-hmm.
so I could be of help to him?
All right. Right. Okay. Now you did mention, I mean, that your son was suicidal, but I'd like to give an audience a sort of contrast, so to speak. Who was your son like, before this depression hit him?
Yeah, that was before this, he was a pretty regular kid.
Okay.
Sometimes in my mind, I go back and I think, oh, he was a joyful baby toddler.
Mm-hmm.
I realized, in retrospect, there were signs that he was more anxious,
Mm-hmm.
maybe
Mm-hmm.
than some people, but it wasn't crippling.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It was when he was a young adult that these emotions, or I guess you'd call it strong emotions, these became overwhelming. And I
Uh-huh.
think that that's pretty common that people, when they're young adults, if they're going to struggle with
Right.
um, mental illness, that it manifests
Right.
then. Um,
Okay, all right. It's interesting you mentioned some things that, like, there were some signs you missed, like anxiety and all that. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but it's a pain in the butt because you don't realize exactly what's going on. So, what were some of the early signs you got that Matt was, that could have led Matt to being depressed?
Do you mean when he was younger or
When yeah,
when he was at college?
before depression hit him really hard, were there like any initial signs that you, in hindsight, you missed? Because I'm thinking like someone might be listening to this podcast and they're thinking, maybe this is what's going on.
Yeah, he definitely reacted to new situations with lots of anxiety that had physical manifestations, like he would throw up if he was anxious,
Uh-huh,
or
uh-huh.
get sometimes not want to try new things, although
Mm-hmm.
not too much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Definitely in high school, he began to kind of lose interest in school. I kept waiting for, his academic interest to ignite,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and it didn't seem to, and had a hard time getting out of bed. But
Mm-hmm.
not again, nothing that you don't even think, well, this is or at the time we thought, well, this is just kind of normal teenage stuff,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A little bit of withdrawing, a little bit of distancing.
Right.
Um,
Oh,
just you can beat yourself up as a parent and say,
true.
well, gee, why didn't I get him help
True.
sooner?
True. True.
But um,
But I,
yeah,
but I mean, it's a matter of really recognizing it. I mean, it's it's really hard to tell, isn't it?
mm-hmm,
Particularly since we're
yeah,
dealing with a teenager.
right.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. What was? Would you know what it was? What it was like for your son, actually experiencing it, actually going through this?
Oh, I think it's very, very difficult. Sometimes he says to me, because he still struggles, not to the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
extent that he did before, we were able to get help or figured out, oh, this is the kind of help he needs. He needs a psychiatrist. He needs a
Right.
counselor.
Right.
But he'll say things like, in the morning, I just wish I felt like getting up, but instead I feel like I'm encased in cement,
Mm-hmm.
and I just can't get out of bed.
Uh-huh.
Or, um, it's sad because I think the things that bring just little bits of joy to
Right.
somebody who's more positive, kind of a healthier mindset, they
Right.
don't seem to touch a person who's depressed in the same way.
Uh-huh.
At
Yes.
least that's been my experience.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. And I also bring this up because I mean, most people who don't suffer from depression, they're not really aware of how the what the experience really is like.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
It's
Go
it's
ahead.
he says, "Oh, Mom, I just I wish that I felt like getting out of bed, or I wish I could think of a reason to get out of bed." And
Mm-hmm.
you're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh my gosh." I wake up in the morning and I just think, "Oh, I'm going to get out of bed."
Right. Right.
It's
Right. Okay. All right. So this the impact on him. Now, I mean, he's this is the impact on him. We discussed about it, but there are others around him, particularly his family. I mean, yourself. There are others in the family. What were some of the challenges you were facing when he was undergoing this?
Well, it's heartbreaking to be on the outskirts of the life of someone who's struggling,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you want to fix it,
All right.
but you can't.
Right.
And there's a conflict in knowing how much is mine to fix and
Mm-hmm.
how much do I have to be confident that eventually he's going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, in our family, my husband and I, in the beginning, were approaching it very, very differently.
Okay.
Um, we both, at first you think there's a choice. You think, well, this person is making a choice.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, we thought, and Matt did a lot of masking his depression and anxiety, coping with it by alcohol and drug abuse, and
Mm.
that's complicates things even further.
Right. Right.
And then he was getting into trouble with the law.
Uh-huh.
He had a couple of arrests because of alcohol related things.
Right.
And then you feel angry. So you feel angry and you want to fix it, but you can't fix it. And
Right.
your husband and the
Right.
wife both have different ideas about
Right.
how to approach it. So we
Right.
would, definitely conflict for us.
Mhm.
Just kind of, what do they call that? What, perfect storm?
Mhm.
Only not perfect because it's so disastrous, a
Right.
disastrous storm, I would say.
Right. Okay, so anger, I mean definitely that's one emotion you felt. What about what other things did you feel? I mean, how did you s- how did you figure out that you needed help? I mean, this is not something that you and the family alone can handle.
Yeah. Um, I knew I needed help.
Okay.
I felt very, lonely. I felt really bewildered.
Mhm.
Um, but knowing that you need help or wishing that you could get help is really different from actually finding the help.
Right. Right.
I think when you're in crisis, when we were in crisis, I guess I can speak for our experience,
Right.
there came a time when I thought, okay, we need help.
Right.
But then to find the energy to get the help,
Mhm.
to know who to call.
Mhm.
At one point, and I write about this in the book, I called the police. I said, I don't know what to do. Well,
Mhm.
they didn't have any good suggestions.
Right. Right.
And I don't blame them because I know police are, saddled with all kinds of situations. But it was like I had worked up the motivation to finally call. I
Right.
was embarrassed about calling. I said,
Uh-huh.
I feel like my son is engaging in behavior that is going to lead to his arrest, but I
Mhm.
don't, I want to know what can I do to help him. And they're
Mhm.
like, well, we can come and arrest him. And I'm like, well, no, that's not exactly,
Right.
I'm trying to avoid that.
Right.
Um, So I think, yeah, there's for us there was a process. We knew we needed help. It was really difficult to find the help we needed.
Mhm.
Now I know you can, there's crisis hotlines you can call. Sometimes you get good help from them, sometimes not.
Right.
You can get a counselor. I finally, would just list. If I heard someone say, oh, so and so's a good counselor, I would write their name down so that
Mhm.
when I needed a counselor, or I had a list of good counselors. Um, but then you call, the good counselors usually don't have room in their schedules.
Right.
You
Right.
call them and they say, oh, I can't fit you in and for 3 months. Well, then you can probably assume, or overgeneralization, well, there's a good counselor, but I need help now.
Right. True.
So
True.
it's definitely a challenge.
Mm. All right. So I think you mentioned this that you felt somewhat embarrassed about reaching out to help. So this comes from something. So I'd like to ask, within your family, what's the reaction when you started asking for help? Would they look at you like, "Oh gosh, mom's gone off the bunker," or was it like, "We really need help. Go, mom."
Yeah. I think, every family member has different reaction. I
Okay.
have a daughter who, she's in her late 20s now, but she was very, I think I don't know, younger people are much more, I don't know, at least again, get help. Yeah, we do need help.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's good to talk to a counselor.
Right.
Um, my parents, on the other hand, they'll say things like, well, when is he going to get over this?
Uh huh.
Not in a
Okay.
mean way, but when, and it's kind of like, oh, I think what we've discovered is this is a condition that he has to live with,
Mhm.
and learn to live with and learn to, cope with these challenges. So
Right.
I think we're fortunate that our family is supportive.
Mhm.
We have all learned a lot of things about depression and anxiety and how it affects a person,
Mhm.
that have helped us live, live with it and cope in better ways.
Mm. Right.
My husband doesn't particularly, because I've said to him, well, a counselor really helped me. Maybe you would like counseling.
Okay,
Uh,
right.
he's not as, he'll go to the counselor and say, wow, they're not helping me. And I'm like,
Right,
well,
right.
give them another chance. What? I don't know.
Right, okay, okay. All right, and within your community, I mean, was there any particular reaction when you were asking for help? I mean, were you seeking help?
At first, yeah, that's it. There's many different reactions, but
Okay.
overwhelmingly, I found support.
All right, thank goodness.
I found that if you ask for help or say, I need help, you can find someone who will support you in getting that help.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that when I overcame, my own embarrassment or my own thinking, oh, I'm so embarrassed, I have to ask for help like this,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
was able to find people who would at least, cheer me on and say, yeah, I don't know, you can find help.
Right.
That's one of the things for me that I've come away with is if somebody, says they need a counselor, then I say to them, would you like help calling? If somebody's depressed, to make a telephone call, that's a
Right.
hard thing.
Right.
So if you're on the outskirts of it and you can say, you know what, I could sit next to you while you make that call.
Right.
Or
Right.
I could dial the number for you if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Or, even for Matt, a couple of times, over the course of a few years, I've at times said, oh, I think you're getting into, a space where you need a counselor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I help him, I sit next to him while he makes the calls.
Mm-hmm.
Or one time I said, oh, you've got to get to a doctor. So I call and then hand him the phone,
Right. Right.
which has been something that worked for us. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know that
Mm-hmm.
it works for everyone, but
Right. But definitely, I mean, definitely the support was there. I mean, I'm thinking for something like this, it's you need all the support you can get.
yeah, yeah, that's that's definitely true. And most, I think we live kind of thinking that the people out there want us to be perfect or
Mm-hmm.
something. But really, I have found if you are willing to say, "Ugh, I'm really hurting in this area," you'll find people will come in and express compassion
Mm-hmm.
and be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So it really is. I mean, it really is a matter of just asking help, and people will react positively.
Yeah, it seems to me that they will.
All
I
right.
mean,
Okay. Cool. Okay.
I've never had anyone say, "Oh, your family, I can't believe your family's going through that." Most people
Right.
say, "Oh, yeah, my cousin or my brother or my
Mm-hmm.
friend
Mm-hmm.
suffers too."
Right. Okay. Okay. So, what were some of the things that you did that enabled you to meet the challenge that you faced? I mean, we already spoke about you're seeking help, but what are some of the things that you did for yourself that enabled you to handle the situation?
Yeah. Well, I'm a person of faith, so I
Okay.
spend, time praying. There's often words in the Bible that really speak to me. I love thinking about like thousands of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and being a writer too. It's like, oh, thousands of years ago, a writer
Mm-hmm.
went to the great effort of recording these words. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a historian. Like, I think I should really investigate sometimes how that happened. But it
Right.
wasn't like, I said to my husband the other day, it wasn't like us. We just sit down at our typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
They put great effort into writing down these words.
Right.
And then they were saved by people who were again expending great effort, and
Mm-hmm.
then today I can read them and they touch me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, for example, today I was reading a verse. I actually was that we can God will give great treasures in the darkness. He has
Mm-hmm.
riches stored for us in secret places.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, wow, it gives you a different perspective
Mm-hmm.
than and um, just, I don't know, I have a deep appreciation for the writers throughout history who have written down words of hope
Mm-hmm.
and saved them so that I can read them, in the Bible or other places. So that gets me, through. Prayer gets me through. Sometimes exercise, that's
Okay.
a practical tip. I try to get exercise every single day. Feel like if you go for a walk,
Right.
it helps to give a better perspective.
Mm.
I have, I'm kind of a creature of routine.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you have a pleasing routine that
Mm-hmm.
helps you get through.
Mm-hmm.
I've become very uh, much better at communicating with my husband
Mm-hmm.
about things and also with my son.
Mm-hmm.
I say to him, it's okay, this is your problem, or not your problem, but it's a problem for me too.
Right.
And it matters, like that you feel sad, you feel depressed, you can't get out of bed, but for me too, if I'm calling you, you need to answer the phone
Right.
soon,
Right.
or you need to make sure. He'll say sometimes if I haven't seen him in a few days, and I'll be like, I can't believe you didn't get in touch with me. I'm your mother. I'm always wondering how you're doing.
Right.
Um, so just being more, and that was probably what the counselor helped me with. I don't want to say most because I learned so many things, but
Mm-hmm.
just you have to communicate, again, your needs or
Right.
your perspective. It doesn't
Right.
mean it's the only perspective,
Right.
but.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And if you said you have cats, my daughter loves pets. I suppose I'm not too much of a pet person, but
Okay.
some people, she said, "Oh, if you only liked petting a cat." I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, if
Okay.
only, right?"
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Some people find a lot of solace in that.
Yeah. True. Okay. So how's Matt doing now? And in general, how are you? How is the family? How's everyone around him doing now?
Oh, thank you for asking that. You know, we're doing better because we have better tools
Okay. All
to
right.
use as Matt struggles. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Pennsylvania. It's a very gloomy time of year,
Mm-hmm.
and we are doing in Pennsylvania, there's lots of social distancing requirements in place
Right.
because of
Right.
the pandemic,
Right.
and that has been enormously hard for Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not being able to meet with the people he usually meets with.
Right.
He's a youth group leader at our church, and they
Right.
are meeting online via Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom, is just so hard for I think everyone, but
Yeah.
in particular, someone who really needs connection.
Right.
I guess we all do, right? But
Yeah.
so Matt's struggling right now, I
Okay.
would say, and I think a lot of it's due to the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and the weather in Pennsylvania isn't great. He has one
Mm-hmm.
of those lights. They're a kind of a light that you sit in front of.
Mm-hmm.
That helps a little bit.
Right. Right. Okay. All
But
right.
he's not struggling like when I wrote the book, when we
Okay.
just were like,
Yeah.
he can hold down a job, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's just he has days where getting out of bed is really hard for him.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess having the tools help.
Yes, if we didn't, if I couldn't say to myself, okay, get a counselor, talk to the doctor, you
Mm.
know, get out for a walk, make sure, um, you're doing all the healthy things that you need to do to maintain
Right.
your own frame of mind, your own
Right.
healthy frame of mind.
Right.
Um,
All right. Cool. Okay. Great. Okay. Now, Faith, in the last minute or so of this interview, are there any words of wisdom you'd like to share, maybe to inspire listeners?
well, people, it depends, I suppose it depends why people are listening, but if
Okay.
you love someone who struggles with mental illness, you're not alone, and there is hope.
Mm-hmm.
That was another thing. I didn't realize when my son was at the very, very worst that he could ever get better.
Mm-hmm.
But people can get better. It doesn't mean they won't always face this challenge,
Right.
but they can learn tools for facing the challenge and get better.
Mm-hmm.
And helping them finding the ways to say, oh, there is hope. We can do this together, and you're not alone. And that I would encourage people that way. You're not alone. Keep at it. Keep on keeping on. Just watched a great movie called Keep On Keeping On. And then if people have stories to share, I think it's really important that we all share our stories. So if somebody's a writer, or if somebody's contemplating writing, share your story.
Right.
And that will certainly help someone else who's facing a challenge.
Right. Okay. Great words. Okay then, so in closing, our guest is Faith McDonald. Her book is On the Loving End of Crazy, Finding Hope and Help to Face Your Loved One's Crippling Anxiety and Depression, and you can find it on Amazon. So Faith, thank you very much for being on Author Story. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was just really a treat for me.
You're welcome. So everyone, check out On the Loving End of Crazy, and go right ahead and hit that subscribe button to go get checked out on all the people and stories we have on this channel. So catch you guys next time on Author Story, the home of authors and people with stories that matter.